All right. Welcome to Unfiltered. This is a side note. I know during the holiday season, it can be a very hard time for people. Maybe they have memories of bad holidays in the past, or maybe they start reflecting on loved ones that they have lost. But during this holiday season, I know it can bring a lot of people down. And I just thought today would be a good opportunity for me to share an experience with you that I had with a friend of mine who has passed away, and her name was Judy. Many years ago, over a decade ago, I was bound in my addiction, drinking and using every day. But not only that, I was also bound in anxiety and depression. I had thoughts of self-harm. Every time I got in the car, I was overwhelmed and I was beaten down severely. And I was listening to the radio early in the morning, and I heard an advertisement on the radio for Meals on Wheels. And so I decided then, when I heard that advertisement, that what I'm going to do is I'm going to not drink and not use for one day out of the week. During this period of time, I'm going to go volunteer for Meals on Wheels, and I'm going to go drive around and I'm going to drop food off at elderly people who are in need. And so I did that. I went and signed up for Meals on Wheels, and I went down to Meals on Wheels, and they trained me. You pick up all the food there, they put it in your car, and then you have this route. And the route that I was on, it took about 2.5 hours. And I had this gentleman with me, and he was training me. We would stop by every single house, and he would just tell me bits and pieces of information that I needed to know about these individuals. And the very first person on my route was a lady named Judy. She was in her mid-60s. And he told me, he said, look, this lady has a really, really mean dog. And so don't ever go inside. Just open up the door and hand her the food at the door. And then that's all you can do, because this lady's dog is extremely protective of her and it's dangerous. But the problem was that when it was my turn to drive, I totally had forgot that he told me that. And so I'm going about my business, and I stop at the very first house. And here I am, beaten down, depressed. I'm overwhelmed with life. And like I said, I'm having thoughts of self-harm every minute of every day. And they were tormenting me. And I'm very down. And I knock on this lady's door, and she opens up the door and she says, God bless you. It is so good to see you. This lady was overwhelmed with joy and with laughter, and she had this very amazing spirit about her that lifted me instantaneously. And after we had this conversation at the door, she invited me to come inside. Now, I totally forgot that she had a dog, and I totally forgot that this guy told me not to do that. So I went inside. Now, what you don't know is that she had recently had a hip replacement, and she was in a lot of pain, and she couldn't walk very well. And so she walked back to her couch and sat down, and I stood in front of her. And for about 30 minutes, we had a very long conversation. Now, look, this lady had broken dentures. This lady had holes in her floor. She had a ripped up, ratty house dress. And yet she had more joy than I had. And yet she was happy about life. She had severe pain in her hip. She was going through so much. And yet she had an atmosphere of joy about her. And me and her had this conversation for about 30 minutes. I don't know if you've ever met anyone and it seemed like you've known them forever. But that's how it was with me and Judy. I felt like I had met someone that I had known all my life, and I instantly felt comfortable with her. And we started sharing stuff with one another. And after about 30 minutes of conversation, she stopped and she said, you know what, Ryan? She said, my dog never lets anybody this close to me. You must have Jesus inside of you. Oh, when she said this to me, it overwhelmed me, and I almost started crying, because here I am driving around, beating myself up, hating life, not seeing any good or value in me. And then this lady tells me that her dog must know that I'm good inside, because that's the only reason why he would let me get so close to her. And she said, Ryan, don't you know that my dog never lets anybody this close to me? You must have Jesus inside of you. After that first initial conversation, I go back in my car and I look in the rearview mirror and I started talking to myself. And I said, I do not have any excuse. I do not have any reason to complain. I do not have any reason to be down. If this lady can be happy with all that she's going through, then I have no excuse. And it lifted me. And it got me out of my mind. I realized that when I was at home struggling, it was just me and my mind all day long. And when you're battling depression by yourself, it doesn't work. And so this lady, she thought I was going to bless her, but really she blessed me. And she carried me that day. And that was the beginning of a very close friendship that I had with her. And every week that I would do Meals on Wheels on a Tuesday, I would stop by her house. And then after the Meals on Wheels route was done, I would go back to her house and spend some time, me and her. And sometimes it was me and her son. And we would talk about everything. I shared with her about being molested as a child. She shared with me about being assaulted by these men behind a bar. We got very, very close. We shared good things and bad things, but we held nothing off. We left nothing off the table. We shared about everything, back and forth and back and forth. I was open and honest with her, and she was open and honest with me. Something you're not supposed to do with Meals on Wheels, but something I did do is I'm actually pretty decent in the kitchen. And so every now and then I would cook extra food and I would put it in the back of my car. And along with the Meals on Wheels food, I would give her this food that I cooked. And that day I cooked fried pork chops, Brussels sprouts, rice, and I just needed one more thing. So I stopped at H-E-B on the way in. And right at the beginning, when you walked in, there was all this display of fruit. And it was always like it was raspberries and blueberries and strawberries. They had these big displays. And I bought her a huge quart of blueberries. Not a small container, a big container of blueberries. And I added it to my meal, and I went to her house. And then I went and I started my route, and I dropped off this food with her, and I gave her the food extra that I had cooked. And I said, look, I'm going to do my whole route, and when I get done, I'm going to come back, and we'll spend some time together. And so I did my route, and when I came back, I opened the door, and she was laying on the couch with her hand on her stomach. And she said, Ryan, I looked on the ground, and that container of blueberries was empty on the ground. She had eaten every single one. And as she's holding her stomach and she's in pain, she said, Ryan, I know I shouldn't have eaten all of them, but you don't understand. I haven't eaten a blueberry in over 10 years. And this thing happened instantaneously. Something happened with my life right at that moment. I realized that I was just doing something simple to help somebody. I just stopped at H-E-B and got the thing that was on sale. But giving her those blueberries, it was different for her. When I went out of my way to help somebody, it made such an impact on her life. She had lived such a rough life, and for the last 10 years of her life, she had been so broken and so rough with money that she had not bought herself any blueberries to eat in over 10 years. So I bring her these blueberries, and they were so delicious. She said, Ryan, I know it's going to upset my stomach, but I loved every single one of them. I felt better about myself that moment than I have ever felt in a long time previously. And I realized that when you go out of your way to help someone out, when you go out of your way to bless other people, it helps you. It gets your mind out of what you're going through, and it helps not only you, but other people. Now, you can say that I was volunteering and blessing these people in Meals on Wheels, but the truth is, those people saved my life. I was so down. I was so bound in depression and anxiety. And those people and my human interactions with those people, they saved me. God strategically placed them in my life to pull me out of the pit that I was in. Me and her got very close, very close. A few months later, we only got to be around each other about 1.5 years, but a few months later, she was diagnosed with leukemia. And within 2 weeks, she had passed away. And during those 2 weeks, she spent time with me, and she was sharing with me the things that she had learned in life. And she told me, she said, Ryan, in life you're going to mess up, and you have got to forgive yourself. If you do not forgive yourself, you're going to anchor yourself in a moment, and life is going to continue to pass and keep going, and you're going to find yourself miserable, depressed, and alone. And then the sun is going to rise, and everything's going to keep going, but you're going to be stuck right here. And then she shared with me a story. She said when she was younger and she turned 18, she left the house immediately. And the very first guy that showed her any attention, they got married. This man was very abusive, very harsh to her, and he drank all the time. And after a few years of marriage, they had a 4-year-old daughter. And she said, I had this day where he had been drinking heavily, and right before we were leaving, I tried to get the keys from him. I tried to stop him from driving. But after a few minutes of an argument, she said, I just gave in. And he got in the driver's seat, I got in the passenger, and our 4-year-old daughter got in the back seat. As they were driving, he ran a red light and a car hit them on the side. And when it hit them on the side, it flipped them upside down and it killed her husband and her 4-year-old daughter instantly. She said, Ryan, as I'm upside down in this car, I'm looking back and I can see my daughter's yellow hair. I can see her blonde hair hanging upside down, and I knew that they had both passed away. You see, this lady had been through a lot in life. She had a very hard life. And she told me, Ryan, I thought about that moment every day of my life since. And it took me years to forgive myself because I always kept thinking, maybe there was something I could do. Maybe I should have stopped him. She put all the blame on what happened on herself. And she said, years later, I finally realized that was not my fault. That was his fault. And I can't keep carrying this every day because it's beating me up, it's beating me down, and it's taking away any possibility of having joy in life. So she said, Ryan, you have got to learn to forgive yourself. Sometimes you're going to mess things up tremendously. And you got to forgive yourself, and you got to move on. And then she also told me if there's people in your life that love you and that you love them, and y'all have some kind of argument where you're not speaking anymore, don't let a single day pass where you don't pick up the phone or go out of your way to make things right with them, because you never know what might happen tomorrow. She suffered horrible losses in her life. Like me, she was so familiar with death time and time again, and it ate up her life. She said, I had been trapped in this house for so many decades, living in depression, living in torment, beating myself up. And yet here you come along, and you bring joy in my life. See, she changed me forever. Me and her lifted each other out of pits that we were in. I loved her as a family member. If I had ever gotten rich, I would make her rich with me. I thought she was going to be in my life forever, but she wasn't. We just had this brief moment of time where we had these human interactions where I loved her and she loved me. I encouraged her. She encouraged me. And the impact that she has made on my life, I will never forget. During this time, it was the time of Johnny Manziel football. And here we are in Texas A&M country. And I went over to her house, and her son were watching football. And they were screaming at the TV and really, really loud. And both of them were having a great time. And her son got up to go use the restroom. And she leaned over to me and she said, Ryan, you know what? I'm going to tell you a secret. She said, I don't even like football. But you know what? He does. She said, when you love somebody, sometimes you do things with them that you may not like doing, but you do it with them because they love it. And because I love him, I am sitting here and I am enjoying this amazing moment with him. And I'm screaming and I'm enjoying the game. But I don't even like football. But he does. So today I like it. I'm not complaining about being here. I'm not making a big deal and letting him know I don't like this. I am enjoying the moment with him, because when you love someone, you stop. You deny your selfishness and selflessness. You deny it. You deny your selfishness and self-centeredness. And you become selfless. And you enjoy the moment so that you get to spend time with those you love. See, these bits and pieces of wisdom and information that she was giving me, they forever changed my life. I actually spoke at her funeral because she asked me to. And I told her, I said, I don't speak in front of crowds anymore. I'm too ashamed of the mistakes I've made. And she said, Ryan, I want you to speak at my funeral. And so at her request, I did. I was bawling right before I spoke. I was bawling right after it was done. And I had this brief moment at her funeral where I was able to share with her family members these experiences that we had had and how she had made such a great impact on my life. Blueberries, simple things. That simple act forever changed me. I realized that if I want to have purpose, if I want to have meaning, then I have to get my thoughts off of myself and start putting them on other people. I got to start helping those around me. Helping broken people is the most satisfying thing that I've ever done. I always had this void inside of me, and God has filled that void, and helping other people makes me satisfied. So during this holiday season, when you are struggling and you are down, go out of your way to get your mind off of you and what you're thinking about and put it on someone else in need. Go out of your way to help someone else, and I promise you, it'll bring you satisfaction. Judy was my friend, and the encounters that I had with her will forever change my life. She had these moments alone with me where she poured out the wisdom that she had gleaned all throughout her life. Because she had a hip replacement, she couldn't move a whole lot. I bought her a CD player back then, and it had a CD that was spinning from the face forward. And she called me after I gave her this CD player, and she goes, Ryan, I realized one thing. CDs don't have a B-side. See, she tried to flip it over like you would a record. Me and her had these moments of tears and moments of laughter. But I made her a mixtape. And it had Otis Redding, Al Green, The Temptations. It had all of these amazing songs on it. And after she listened to the mixtape, she's like, how did you know that I like this music? And I said, because I know music. And 2 or 3 days before she died, I went over to visit her, and she was listening to that. She was listening to that CD, and amazing songs were being played. And she looked at me and she said, Ryan, my doctor told me I could never do this again, but I'm fixing to die, and we're going to do this. And she said, tonight, before you leave, I'd like you to dance with me. And so me and her, we danced. We danced that night, and I'll never forget it. I'll never forget that moment. She was in pain, and we danced to this amazing music, and that forever changed my life. Judy is one of the people that God put in my life that carried me, and she is one of the people that is a reason why I'm standing here today, why I'm still alive today, why I have joy, why I have peace. God strategically placed these people in my life, and they forever changed me. Judy was a true friend of mine. And I'm saying all of this to you today so you clearly understand. You can make a difference in someone else's life. Showing unconditional love to those who are beaten down and broken, it could save their life and forever change them. Me and her, we danced that night a few days before she died. And then she passed. And ever since she's been gone, I will never forget our moments together, the things we shared with each other, the wisdom she gave me. She taught me so much in that short period of time, and it pulled me out. Now, it would be years later before I got sober. It would be years later before things actually got right in my life. But she was planting a seed that would later come to fruition. Later. She was telling me I'm important, and I was telling her that she was important. She was telling me about God, and I was telling her about God. I was leaning on her, and she was leaning on me, and we carried each other for a brief moment. So yes, when I look back, I do shed tears because I have a heart inside. But I also smile because she made such an impact on my life. And today, during these holiday seasons, I reflect back on Judy. I love her. She meant so much to me and still means so much to me today. Do not miss the opportunity to have an encounter with someone that may change your life. Stop, unplug, quit being so busy and so stressed all the time, and see what's in front of you. During these holiday seasons, be grateful for those who have not passed away, the people who are still in your life. Stop. Don't be so stressed. Don't worry about minor stuff that's not important. Enjoy the moment and smile. God has been so good to me. God bless you. Have a good day.